Canadians are in the most amount of debt they have ever been. This has all been thanks to rising interest rates. This is courtesy of easy monetary policies. This circular madness cannot continue forever. There can always be foreigners or central bankers who will buy up anything. But the majority of the people will still be hit hard in the pocketbook, and the day of reckoning is upon us. You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. Today we're going to look specifically at Canada. I want to focus on the debt issue that has really accumulated over the past few years, become a real big problem. So you can see the chart on the right hand side, year over year house price change in Canada's biggest cities, and you'll notice Toronto right at the top of the list. It has become astronomical how expensive properties have become in such a short period of time. I have been warning about this, I've been talking about this even locally, and people just don't want to admit that these prices have gone too high. And the reason is, my speculation is that many of these people have pulled the equity out of their properties in hopes that they will continue to rise. Housing prices post record June rise. So what we are looking at here is the biggest June rise on record, 2.6% increase. So this doesn't surprise me at all. I do believe that, look, it can continue, there's no doubt. The question I have is, at what point do interest rates have to hit before we have a big problem? There is no question in my mind that this cannot be sustained with higher rates of interest. This is being fueled by debt. Most people will simply say, I really don't care what it's fueled by as long as I make more money. And I can definitely agree with what people are saying. I get what you're saying. However, interest rates will finally get to a point where they reach that, let's call it tipping point or breaking point, and people can't afford it. It's not as if people are coming in and they are paying cash for their properties. Sometimes that happens, but ultimately most purchases are being financed, maximum amount of debt, and the public doesn't want to really address that scenario. You don't need 20%, although that's what they would recommend. Many people today are buying with 5% down. And 5% down on $1 million property, you really don't need to have much. They do these stress tests to pretend that they'll be able to withstand a much higher rate of interest should interest rates rise at some point. However, we know that the data has been made out to be fraudulent. That is a fact. Not in all cases, assuredly, but with the alternative lenders, we don't know exactly what they're doing. Canadians have heard the message over and over again from the Bank of Canada and so on. Personal debt levels are alarmingly high, especially in light of the interest rates that are only poised to increase. I've been talking about this for quite some time. You look like a fool at this time. However, when we look back in the past and we notice all of these things that have happened, it really takes on a different message. But at this time, I'm willing to be ridiculed because I know how valid these points are. Why aren't those warnings convincing Canadians to borrow less? The answer may lie in a combination of blissful finance ignorance, economic incentives to keep borrowing, and complex subconscious attitudes towards debt. We are comfortable carrying debt, and that is a fact. If you talk to people from Toronto, you will hear this similar thing, that they don't care. I mean, look how much it takes to finance it. When you can get a car for 0% financing, when you can get your home, when you only need 5% of the total, you own that whole home, but you only put 5% down, and sometimes less. But let's say even 5%. It's really, people think about it and they think, why bother? Why do I need to save up 100% of the home before I move out when I could only put down 5%? When you look at it that way, it makes a lot of sense to me. But unfortunately, this is going to become a big burden. And in the US, what a lot of people did was they simply walked away from their homes. As I've said before, you can't have that in Canada. It doesn't work like that. There will be massive amounts of bankruptcies that occur as a result. People are not able to afford the homes that they've bought. And they'll know that in the near future. I don't know when, but interest rates are rising. That's the plan that they're going with, apparently. And if they continue to do so, you're going to have a very big problem. I assure you, I sound like a broken record, but here we are. Canadians' appetite for debt is as insatiable as ever. A new report, credit monitoring from Equifax, suggests that Canadian consumers owned $1.7 trillion at the end of the first quarter. That's 6.9% in a year. Doesn't really surprise me one bit. And when you talk about $1.7 trillion, you have to remember that the Canadian economy is significantly smaller than the US economy. So that doesn't really look good for the future. Despite increasing debt numbers, more monthly payments are being made on time and there are fewer bankruptcies. These are fraudulent numbers. We've seen what they've done in the US where they simply wipe bad debt off, or basically wipe off the bad off of people's credit reports, and that allows them to have a better credit report. Why even have a credit rating if you can simply manipulate it? It's just like the inflation rates and everything else. How do we have any trust in any of these institutions when they're simply manipulating it in their favor? Tomorrow, it could be quite the opposite. You don't know. Today, they're benefiting those who are taking on a lot of debt. Tomorrow, certainly could be quite the opposite. Okay? Now, switching gears here for a moment. If you can't afford a home, you don't have to worry because you can sleep in one of these. That's right. These are essentially coffins, the way I look at it. Shared compartment service appears in office buildings in Shanghai. It's sort of a futuristic type compartment slash coffin. And this is, it's hard to look at to imagine that people are working so much that they don't want to go home. They can sleep in these. And it's interesting, actually. It says that they automatically disinfect with ultraviolet light after each use. So it's not just necessarily a box. There's some technology involved here. But the way I think of it is the amount of population that is located in some of these cities is insane. Then you have the costs involved that people are simply, they don't want to take their transit back. It's going to take them an hour or two or what have you to get back home. So they simply say, look, I'll just sleep here. I'm only going to be sleeping for 5 hours anyway. Might as well just sleep in this box and then head back to work. And why? Why are we doing all of this? The whole system is broken. Why are you at work 16 hours of the day when you should be doing whatever it is that you want to do? Spending time with your family, reading a book, whatever it is that you fancy. But essentially everything has been turned upside down. Things have become so expensive, but people just don't want to think about it. It's ridiculous. Look at the system. It's broken. And just look at it. Most people, maybe not you, maybe not the person you're thinking about, but a lot of people work themselves to the bone so that they can afford that car that they drive to work in, so that they can afford that luxury condo or maybe that beautiful home that they have. And they're spending all these monthly subscriptions that they have and everything else, yet they're not concerned about the thing that is most important, and that is the well-being of that individual. And that's what I see. When I see these boxes, that's exactly what I think about. All right. This is changing gears yet again. When prosecutors first pushed for the power to seize telephone and internet records themselves, bypassing the need for a judge to approve a warrant, they argued the power was necessary to help them quickly track down missing children and sexual predators. And it shows here that the prosecutors have used the significant subpoena power hundreds of times a year in routine investigations related to larceny, check fraud, assault, and other common crimes. Guess what? They steal our information, and it's not just the NSA and the powers that go sort of in the shadows. It is the regular government which is going through and able to access any of our data. That's a fact. It's coming out. It is very important, I believe, to look at this type of information and realize our government is gone. We shouldn't have any trust in these institutions at all. They are overrun by corporations who have one thing in mind, and that is not your best interests, I assure you. That's why I suggest to people that when you invest in these corporations, you're investing in the same part of that same conglomerate that steals your liberty. That, for me, anyway, you do what you want. But for me, I don't want any part of that. If you found this video informative, please give me a thumbs up. Last but not least, if you found the video informative, I know you'll find my books, The Money GPS, and my new release, Global Economic Collapse, even more informative. The first book is about the 4 asset classes and how to profit from them, whereas my new book takes on familiar concepts, but I get into what I call the Money GPS strategy, and that is how to reduce your monthly expenses, how to earn income, and other things. So you can check that out at Amazon. Links are in the description below. And I just wanted to mention, thank you all for your comments on yesterday's video, where I took on a really different topic than I've covered recently. I haven't covered that topic in a long time, and I just saw a lot of positivity towards me covering that. It's not something that I want to cover all the time. I had, done a lot of research on that many years ago, and then it's hard to look into that type of information. It really takes a toll on somebody to just pour over it hours and hours and hours and then try to tell other people about it. It's difficult. Anyway, so I do appreciate that you appreciated it. So that's all. Take care.